Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today, I'm going to go my review of AEW Dynamite's Grand Slam. Starting off tonight, we had Nigel McGuinness versus Bryan Danielson. McGuinness walks out to the ring. He is patiently waiting for Danielson to come out to the ring. Danielson music hits, but Danielson doesn't walk out. Referee then starts a 10 count, and then all of a sudden, final countdown plays, and Danielson appears. Danielson goes out to the ring. The match starts. It was a good match. Back and forth matchup between McGuinness and Danielson. Danielson and McGuinness then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Danielson applying a label lock on McGuinness, but the hold is broken. Danielson then hits a running knee on McGuinness, as well as landing multiple yes kicks for a near fall. McGuinness gets up, lands a lariat on Danielson in the middle of the ring. McGuinness then hits a Tower of London for a near fall on Danielson. Danielson then gets up, applies another label lock on McGuinness. McGuinness taps out, and your winner of the match, and still winner, Bryan Danielson. After the match, Christian Cage comes out to the ring. It looks like he was going to sign his contract for an AEW World Championship match opportunity, but he is stopped by Kip Sabian. Sabian steals the pen from Christian Cage and runs off. So it looks like Cage still has a lot of adversity still trying to get a matchup with Bryan Danielson. Moving on from that, we have an FTW title matchup. It is Hook defending the FTW title against Roderick Strong. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Hook and Strong, with Hook hitting Strong with a kendo stick. Hook then attacks Undisputed Kingdom. Hook was trying to keep the pace of the match, but Strong hits a running knee. But Hook applies his signature red rum on Strong. Strong taps out, and your winner of the match and still FTW champion is Hook. After the match, he is met by Tony Schiavone. Schiavone pretty much praises Hook, talks about his accolades that he's had defending the FTW title. But then Hook says that he is retiring the FTW title, and then he ends up handing the belt over to the original owner, his father, Taz. So it looks like the FTW title is no more, and the belt is officially retired. Moving on from that, we go into our tag team matchup for the AEW Tag Team Championships. It is Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay versus the Young Bucks. I thought this was a great match. Probably match of the night for me. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Kyle and Ospreay keeping the pace of the match. Kyle and Ospreay then hit a moonsault, taking out the Young Bucks at the outside. Ospreay hits an Oz Cutter on the Bucks. Ospreay then hits a Springboard 450. Ospreay then hits a Hidden Blade as well. Nick Jackson and Kyle both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Nick Jackson hitting a Hurricane Rana off the apron. Young Bucks then hit a TK driver off the apron and looked absolutely brutal. Kyle and Will then hit a Styles Clash on the Bucks. Ospreay hits another Oz Cutter, as well as a Stormbreaker for a near fall. Ospreay and Kyle then hit a TK driver of their own on the Bucks for a near fall. Don Callis then gives Kyle Fletcher a screwdriver. Kyle then goes to hit Matt Jackson with the screwdriver, but he is stopped by Will Ospreay, which allowed the Young Bucks to hit a BTE trigger, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match, and still AEW Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks. Hats off to the Bucks for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have a Prince Nana segment. Nana comes out to the ring. He is greeted by Tony Schiavone. Schiavone wants to know what is the status of Swerve. Nana says that there is nothing that can stop Swerve. Nana says that Swerve at this point is not medically cleared to compete. After that, he is interrupted by none other than MVP. MVP shows up. The crowd gets hyped. MVP then hypes up Swerve. MVP then mocks Prince Nana. And then MVP ends up handing Prince Nana a business card to pretty much have Swerve join him and his possible new stable. A lot of interesting stuff there between MVP and Prince Nana, which I will talk about towards the end of the podcast. Moving on from that, we have an AEW Women's Championship matchup. It is Yuka Sakazaki versus Mariah May. I thought it was a decent match. Back and forth matchup between Yuka and Mariah May, with Yuka keeping the pace of the match. May hits a Storm Zero, though, on Yuka, pins her for the 3, and your winner of the match, and still AEW Women's Champion, is Mariah May. After the match, Willow comes out to the ring to confront Mariah May, and then May leaves the ring. She goes up to the ramp, and then she is stopped by none other than Mina Shirakawa. Looks like Shirakawa wants some answers from Mariah May. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW Dynamite's Grand Slam. It is Jon Moxley versus Darby Allin for the number 1 contendership for the AEW World Championship. I thought it was a good match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Darby and Mox, with Moxley keeping the pace of the match. Darby hits a coffin drop, taking out Moxley to the outside. Moxley then applies a submission hold, but the hold is broken. Moxley hits the finish, though, on Darby, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and new number 1 contender is Jon Moxley. After the match, Danielson comes out to the ring, quickly attacks Moxley. The Blackpool Combat Club come out to the ring to attack Danielson, and Private Party come out to save Bryan Danielson. A couple things I want to talk about, man, when it pertains to Grand Slam last night. Pretty much the meat and potatoes of what happened last night. Number 1, man, let's start with the biggest elephant in the room, man. MVP. MVP ends up showing up last night. It has been speculated and rumored for a while now that MVP, Bobby Lashley, and Shelton Benjamin, the Hurt Syndicate, could be possibly joining AEW. And that looks like it is official as of last night that the Hurt Syndicate are on their way to AEW. MVP is officially signed with the company. I feel like it's been since, I think, last month that it came out that he has signed with the company a month ago and has joined AEW. What does this mean and how do I feel? To me, what does this mean for the Hurt Syndicate? I think it's a big deal. I think it's something where, the fans can expect them to, put on good matches. I think, Shelton Benjamin is one of those guys who's severely underrated. And if Shelton is coming over, Shelton can put on really, really good matches at his age, still to this day. But it also means that this Hurt Syndicate idea could also be something where they can run roughshod on the AEW roster and really be that, top draw and top stable of AEW. Because right now, Undisputed Kingdom ain't doing shit. We haven't heard anything from Adam Cole as of late. This could be something where, the Hurt Syndicate are the main deal stable on AEW television. Am I against Bobby Lashley and the Hurt Syndicate coming over to AEW? No. I mean, my thing with Bobby, I feel like, in his position that he was in, being a free agent, obviously he was testing the market. But I felt like, his home was better suited over in TNA. Obviously he has had some matches over there. He's wrestled for TNA. He was a former, TNA world champion. So I figured that TNA would probably offer Bobby a lot of money and probably welcome him back with open arms. But that doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. It looks like they're going to be joining AEW, and hopefully we get some more insight on what MVP is going to do, if we're going to see Bobby or Shelton. And obviously everybody wants to know what Swerve is going to say now that, MVP offers, Prince Nana a business card to maybe try to have Swerve leave Prince Nana and join him in his new faction. So again, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what Swerve has to say in his response. And it's going to be interesting to see what MVP does next, man. So I'm definitely looking forward to next week's Dynamite. The other thing I want to talk about, too, which might be a hot take, is Darby Allin and Jon Moxley. Did I agree with the outcome of the match? No. I thought the outcome of the match was bullshit, to be honest with you. And it might be a hot take for a lot of people, but let me explain. Obviously, everybody knows, if you know AEW, obviously they have a big pay-per-view coming up here in October, I believe October 12th, if I'm not mistaken, for WrestleDream, which will be live in Tacoma, Washington. Now, why is this a big deal? It's a big deal because if you look at Darby Allin and Bryan Danielson, both these gentlemen are from the great state of Washington. And the fact that WrestleDream is a pay-per-view for AEW, it's going to be live from Tacoma, Washington, their home state for both Darby and Bryan Danielson, it just fits perfectly with the story between Darby and Bryan Danielson. And they can really build off that leading in to WrestleDream. The other thing that kind of pissed me off with the Moxley situation is that we've already seen Moxley versus Danielson before, when Moxley was trying to recruit Bryan Danielson to come over to the Blackpool Combat Club. Now, things have changed, obviously, and, at that time, neither one of those guys were world champions, from what I understand, and now that Danielson is world champion, it looks like they're going to try to run it back. But, to me, it was one of those things where I feel like Tony Khan kind of shot himself in the foot in booking the outcome of this matchup. Obviously, there's some heat there. I'm not saying that there's not heat, there's not a storyline there. I'm not saying that. Obviously, we all saw what happened at All Out when Moxley had jumped Bryan Danielson and pretty much sent a message to Bryan Danielson and pretty much kicking him out of the Blackpool Combat Club, from at least that's what it seemed. So obviously there's a story there. But the problem is can they build off that? Can they tell a story that can actually get the fans invested? Me as a fan, though, I'd rather see Darby Allin versus Bryan Danielson at WrestleDream. And the other biggest thing, from this whole situation is you look at the build-up towards Grand Slam that happened last night. No one thought that Bryan Danielson was even going to compete on the card, hence the reason why they didn't book Darby Allin versus Danielson at Grand Slam last night. But then you see Nigel McGuinness coming out with a contract that he had from Tony Khan for a matchup against Bryan Danielson, where Danielson ends up showing up anyway at Grand Slam. So there's a lot of confusion there when it pertains to Bryan Danielson and on what the hell was going on with the situation with Danielson. But my belief is the same, man. I think Darby should have been the one that went over on Moxley, and they have a bill between Darby and Danielson leading up to Wrestle Dream. It's in these guys' home state, their hometown, and Darby goes over. And Darby beats Bryan Danielson, and Danielson retires from full-time in-ring competition. And Darby is the new AEW World Champion, where he can carry this company into different heights and new, spotlights, if you will, of the company. And I think that's something where Tony Khan dropped the ball on, to be honest with you. It might be a hot take for a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to discredit Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley's great. He's a great wrestler. He's a great athlete. He's a great world champion. But I will say this. When AEW finds himself in a little bit of a conundrum, man, and they need to figure shit out quick, the number one guy they usually go to is Jon Moxley. If you go back to the history of AEW since Moxley's been with the company, I remember the situation with CM Punk when he was out with injury. And he couldn't defend, the belt or something like that. And they brought in Moxley, and Moxley was the interim champion and became the actual champion. And, AEW at that time were really trying to cover their ass with whatever the hell was going on at the time with, CM Punk and AEW. And it was a crucial part of AEW. It was a big deal. So, that Tony Khan, appointed Moxley to come in and kind of save the day for AEW. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing that Tony Khan's doing with Jon Moxley once again. And to me, from the outside looking in, obviously, it does seem like Tony Khan doesn't have a whole lot of faith nor trust in Darby Allin. And I don't understand why. Darby Allin is one of the pillars of this company. He's one of the original guys that signed with this company. And to be honest with you, it's Darby's time. Because at this point, there's nothing else more this guy can do in AEW that he already hasn't done. I mean, the match last night and what he's put his body through, I'd be surprised if that guy at the age of 40 can actually walk for the amount of crazy shit that he's done in AEW since he's been with the company. The crazy spots, going through glass and all the crazy bumps that he takes during these matches. Yeah, I'd be surprised if the guy's even walking at the age of 40. So my thing is with Darby is that guy to be the new AEW World Champion, and especially in the route that AEW is going in now with obviously HBO Max and stuff like that. They need a change. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Danielson. But we know that Danielson's full-time in-ring career is coming to an end. So if they had to look at, okay, well, is it going to be Jon Moxley that's going to be Danielson, or is it going to be Darby Allin that beats Bryan Danielson? You know what I mean? Or we go into Wrestle Dream with Moxley and Danielson beats Moxley and walks out AEW World Champion. Then where is that going to leave us? That means everything they had built up with Darby Allin and Jon Moxley meant absolute shit. And that's the problem. And the other thing, too, with Moxley, and I might be the only one on this island by myself, which is fine. I'm okay with that. But I need to know more of what the hell is going on here with this stable and what his plan is. I mean, we've heard the whole thing with Tony Schiavone when he told Schiavone this is no longer their company. Well, I need a little bit more on why this is no longer their company. What is the vision of this new stable? Where is the direction of where this stable is going? If they're trying to build a younger talent for the future of this company, okay, well, tell me why. Why did we get to this point, and how did we get to this point, and where are we going? We don't have that. We don't have the what, the where, and the when, or the how. We don't have that. And I also think that might be a crucial point of Shane McMahon possibly coming into AEW, and which is kind of funny because I saw a picture that surfaced this morning on Twitter that I don't know if Shane was at Grand Slam last night, but I do know that he had took a picture at an airport with none other than the CEOs or the VPs, if you will, with the Young Bucks, and took a picture at an airport with the Young Bucks, which surfaced this morning on Twitter. So I don't know if Shane was there last night with AEW. Who knows? But do I think this is something where with this angle with Moxley they should bring in Shane? Hell yeah. Yeah. Because Shane can come in as a heel and try to take over AEW and take away everything that Tony Khan has built up to this point with AEW. The angle fits perfectly. But they had to have a beginning and an end to that. I mean, if you look at what the Elite did with Tony Khan, that whole storyline went nowhere. It went from anarchy in the arena to a blood and guts matchup that after that, it went from that to nothing. Nothing at all. So if that's the direction, the angle they're going, we need to have a beginning, a middle, and the end and figure out really what the hell is going on here with Jon Moxley. And right now, we're not getting that. All we do know is that Moxley has his sights set on Bryan Danielson now that he had defeated Darby Allin and became the new number one contender for Danielson's AEW World Championship. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out leading up to Wrestle Dream, to be honest with you. And for Darby, if I was Darby Allin, I'd be pissed off. To be honest with you, man. I think they dropped the ball with Darby. I think Darby should have went over and beat Moxley and challenged Bryan Danielson at Wrestle Dream, and both these guys' hometown, home state, and possibly went over and beat Bryan Danielson and became the new AEW World Champion. It writes itself, man, for all parties involved. Danielson retires for full ring in a competition in his home state, in his hometown, and you have a homegrown talent being Darby Allin, hometown being Washington State, I think he's from Seattle, becoming a new AEW World Champion for the first time in his home state and beating the legend Bryan Danielson. I mean, it writes itself, man. You know what I mean? Like, it really does. And that's the one thing that I don't get with Tony Khan at AEW. You got the story right there. There's not that much effort you got to put into that shit. It writes itself. Now, again, I'm not saying that there's not some heat there in the story between Moxley and Bryan Danielson. Obviously, the connection they have with Blackpool Combat Club, and obviously what Moxley did to Danielson after what happened, I believe it all out. I'm not saying there's not a story there. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying Moxley doesn't deserve an opportunity at Bryan Danielson. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying to you is, as far as a story and how easy this shit can be and how great it will be, it's right there with Darby. Right there. Two homegrown talents. The pay-per-view's in Washington State, at Tacoma, Washington. Both these guys are from the great state of Washington. It's a win-win. If Bryan loses in Tacoma, he retires full ring in competition in his hometown, his home state. And then the winner of that is also from the great state of Washington and becomes the first ever AEW World Champion in his home state. Do you imagine the uproar that would be if that happened at Wrestle Dream? It writes itself. That's what I mean. That's the biggest thing that I take away from this, man. It's like, man, it was so easy to build this shit up between Darby and Bryan Danielson leading up to Wrestle Dream. It was absolutely perfect, man. Poetry in motion. But they dropped the fucking ball with it and gave it to Jon Moxley. You know, and my thing with Mox, that whole storyline with Mox does kind of defeat the purpose, because they booked that damn matchup between Darby and Moxley based on solely that Danielson wasn't going to show up at Grand Slam last night, even though that he had another match that he was booked for, thanks to Nigel McGuinness. And they already put a marquee up between McGuinness and Bryan Danielson. Tony Khan wasn't going to do that shit if Danielson wasn't going to show up at Grand Slam last night. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just takes away the match and the match away from the fans. You know? It's just one of those things where it's like, damn, bro, it's so easy to write this shit. Especially when it pertains to Darby and Bryan Danielson. The fucking match is in Washington State. Both these guys are from Washington. Their hometown is Washington. You got one from Spokane, Washington with Danielson, and you got one from Seattle with Darby Allin. It writes itself, folks. I mean, it's easy to do it. It's right there in front of your faces. And nobody wants to do it. And Tony Khan doesn't want to pull the trigger on it. So then you have to ask yourself this. How much trust and faith does Tony Khan have in Darby Allin? Because right now it doesn't seem like he has a whole hell of a lot of faith in Darby. And it's not like Darby, I can't sit here and say that Darby, with all the shit that he's done in AEW, and he's done some crazy shit in AEW, that he's one of those guys and one of those superstars that are injury prone. They're not. He's not. You know, before that he was hit by a damn bus in New York City. Came back a couple weeks later and showed up and showed out. So, my thing is with Darby, it's like, well, what's going on here? Do you not have trust in this guy to carry this company? Because I'm going to tell you right now, Darby goes over on Bryan Danielson and beats him for that world title in Tacoma, Washington that night. If that were to happen, oh my God, man! If Darby wasn't over more now, he'd definitely be over then in his hometown, beating Danielson and becoming the new AEW World Champion for the first time ever. Are you kidding me? And I would bring Sting, have Sting align himself up for that one night for one of the biggest matches in Darby's career. Absolutely. And even at that match, you got Bryan Danielson showing up with his family, his wife, his kids. It's a wholesome moment, bro. Like, why not just do that shit? We've already seen Moxley and Danielson already. And again, it's one of those things where I feel like Tony Khan had to do this because they backed themselves in the corner. And what is Tony Khan's safety net? Well, it's Jon Moxley. And we've already seen this before with Moxley being the safety net with the whole issue with CM Punk. And, Moxley happened to be interim champion and all this other bullshit. So we've seen the fact that Tony Khan is quick to pull the trigger on Jon Moxley as far as being a safety net for AEW. And I feel like this is kind of the same thing that they're doing now, because Tony Khan creatively, booked himself in a corner with this. And I'm sorry, but like I said, I will stand on that hill by myself when I say that Darby Allin should have got the win over Jon Moxley last night and had, his new, number one contendership leading up to Bryan Danielson at Wrestle Dream. It writes itself, man. It really does. For a company that has a hard time telling a story and getting fans invested, you book Darby versus Danielson at Wrestle Dream and both these guys' home state, it writes itself, man. It writes itself. And that's where I feel like they dropped the goddamn ball, to be honest with you, man. And it's a shame. It really is a shame. And there's a lot of things, even after what happened last night, that doesn't pertain to Moxley, that still a lot of questions need to be answered. Especially like MVP. MVP was definitely the vocal point last night going in the Grand Slam. And now everybody's like, okay, well, Bobby's definitely coming. Shelton's definitely coming. When are they coming? Are they coming next week? Are they coming on the 5th year anniversary of Dynamite? But they will show up on Dynamite at some point here very quickly. And the other biggest question is, how is Swerve going to respond to what MVP did to Prince Nana? Is he going to join MVP? Or is he going to stay with Prince Nana to take down this new enemy being MVP and the Hurt Syndicate? It's a tall tale task for Swerve, man. It is. But Swerve's a company guy. And is he missed? Yeah. Swerve, Christ, man, Swerve, I've had a lot of praise for Swerve. Swerve's done a hell of a job, man, with that AEW World Championship that he had, that run that he had, the matches he's had with Adam Page, man. Oh, my God, dude. Look at the match. He just had it all out. Some people, even now, are still talking about that match and saying how crazy that match was, and at times it was hard to watch, but holy shit, I can't believe this happened or that happened. Those guys tore the house down in that steel cage match that night. There was a lot of controversy at the end of that matchup. But those guys brought it. Absolutely. Both Page and Swerve beat the hell out of one another in that steel cage. So I have a lot of praise for Swerve, man. But it's going to be interesting. Like I said, man, it's going to be a tall tale task for Swerve to go up against the Hurt Syndicate, man. Because, going up against someone like Bobby Lashley and possibly Shelton Benjamin, we're going to see what happens with Swerve, man. I definitely want to see what Swerve's going to say. It's definitely got me intrigued of what his possible response is going to be for MVP, and hopefully we get to see Swerve come back here, maybe hopefully in the next 2 weeks, possibly on the anniversary show of Dynamite. But like I said, man, do I think Grand Slam was a great show last night? No. Do I think it was horrible? No. Do I think it was better than the past 2 Dynamites? Hell to the yeah. But that's not saying a lot. That's not saying a lot, because Dynamite has been in the drizzling shits for the past few months, man. It's not been great television for AEW Dynamite, which if you watch the show just like I do, you guys know. I mean, there's a lot of more, other shit they can do to make the show better. You look at the ratings and just the attendance record alone, man, it's not good. It's not good. And I'm not going to sit here and say that with MVP coming over with Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin is the shot in the arm that AEW needs. No. Is it a good addition? Absolutely. But it's not something that's going to be like, oh, holy shit, AEW is really pulling out all the stops. No. You're going to have a bigger pop and more what ifs if Shane shows up on AEW television than anybody else right now. To be honest with you. Because nobody in their right mind, ever since AEW was a thing, ever thought that we would see a McMahon walk through the doors of AEW. And that could actually happen with Shane being a part of AEW television and being a part of AEW. So it's still up in the air. Hopefully we do get some more insight on what Shane's doing right now. Right now it's kind of ice cold on what Shane is going to do with AEW, what the plans are for Shane. But like I said, man, the biggest vocal point was MVP last night. And what Swerve's going to do now that MVP has pretty much called out Swerve. And hopefully we get a response from Swerve. And like I said, man, it wasn't the worst Grand Slam, but it damn sure was not the best Grand Slam either. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW Dynamite's Grand Slam. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful.